Okay, so everyone's here now, right? We're good now. You got your ice
Yep,
cream, Andy?
I got my ice cream right here.
Okay, good. And then how do we actually pronounce the new set's name? Andy, what do you think?
Ar Arcasia's Island?
Okay. I'm going with Archazia Island. John?
I think Arcasia's Island.
Yeah,
I could be completely
It's
wrong.
not. Justin, do you know what it is?
I don't. I can't do that though. It just sounds
I
ridiculous.
have
It
no
sounds
idea.
like someone ordering like the bruschetta the wrong way or something like that.
Anyways, we got to get to the
Yes.
set review. We're not going to try to say the words. We are here tonight to actually focus on like what's in the set, let alone what the name is of the set. I'm excited to be here. Thanks you all for joining us who are watching this. I'm Noah Barnett, the founder of Purple Shadow Gaming, and I've pulled together some incredible people for us to talk about the set 7 implications on the competitive meta. You can go other places on YouTube and other things to see all about the new set and like all the cool things in the new set, but we're going to focus on the competitive meta and what's actually going to influence that and what we think. And we're going to come back maybe in like 3 months and see if like we were right or wrong, or maybe we finally figured out how to say the set name. Who knows? Okay. So we're going to dive into it tonight. Again, Justin, John, and Andy, thanks for being here. So yeah, Arcasia's Island. What do we think about this thing? What are your initial thoughts overall from like the competitive mechanics, other things, how it's shaping the competitive meta? John?
Uh, I really like that they've thrown enough cards in here that force different play styles that are at a strong enough power level that they could potentially impact what we're seeing in the routine meta that we've seen since set 2.
Yeah. Anything stand out specifically as like an example of that?
I'd say there's the mechanic that wraps around Ink Geyser, and then there's the mechanic that wraps around the new items, and then the way that they're going to interact with Belle and Scrooge, and then there's specifically the new shift style mechanic that's coming with Baymax. That might not be impactful this set, but it'll be nice to see how that moves going forward into future sets.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, what do you think about the new set and how it'll impact the competitive meta?
I was, I think, a bit underwhelmed actually. I didn't think it really changed a whole lot, but what I kind of struck me was I think they're doing a good job of not power creeping cards. I didn't think like anything jumped out as like, oh my God, that's like amazing. So I guess props to Ravensburger for their design.
Yeah. No, I think that is a great point. And we were talking to someone earlier, I think it was Sailor who mentioned it, that like because they've designed certain cards in the past, it actually prevents them from designing. But Ravensburger's done a good job at like preventing kind of these like conflicts amongst old cards and new cards. He specifically called out the 3-drop Ursula, the double singer, and how like you can't really have like the 3-drop song kind of thing is like dangerous design space, but we haven't yet like kind of creeped over that. So I definitely feel that. There does already feel like there are some cards in here where you're like, oh, I've seen this card before, and is it really even better than the current version? But Andy, what do you think? How do you feel overall about the set and how it's going to impact the competitive meta?
I think it's doing a good job at like reinforcing archetypes, like Red Steel. I know we've seen it in the past, but they're actually trying to support that better now. Same with like Blue Green. I think they're building off on these archetypes that people have created in the past sets, but just needed that extra like push or just creating cards now that might benefit them later along, maybe set 8 or set 9, but they're starting to build on a foundation that's going to look pretty solid.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And one thing that stood out to me was how they're exploring new spaces we haven't seen. So the two things that come to mind for me, and I would love to hear if you guys have any others, is like being able to play stuff out of your ink has been something I've thought about for a while. And the fact that, yes, it's maybe not as powerful yet, but this idea that you can like play something and then look at your ink, which is normally a game loss, has now like a part of the game where you can like play stuff out of your ink. Well, Mufasa was like close in kind of a weird way, but the new Pongo, I think it is, really seems to kind of like scratch that surface. And that's really interesting. The second one that stood out to me was the fact that we're changing how you win the game. You know, with the new Donald Duck, where it's Donald Duck, right? Yeah, the new Donald Duck is like, oh, your opponent has to get to 25 and I have to get to 20. And on the surface, you're like, maybe that's not that powerful right now. But the idea that that could be the case means we could explore like you only have to get to 17, or there could be an item in the future that's like both players have to get to 24, or like just different things along those lines, which I thought were really cool as like alternative win conditions, or not alternative, but like it changes the win condition of the game. Anything else stand out about this set before we move into card reviews? Because that's what we really want to focus on, and then talk about deck.
Well, if you know, a nice segue into card reviews, it kind of goes well here with Coil. Obviously, there's probably a lot of talk on Coil right now, but what I think strikes me most on Coil, and everybody talks about inefficient card removal compared to other trading card games. I think what strikes me is that they're doing here is they're kind of requiring you to have 2 cards to have efficient removal, so you don't get anything overpowered, especially with the ability to like play these cards for free, whereas other TCGs, you get less of that. And so you have to pair this card with another card in order to get like good removal. So then you kind of allow yourself to basically have a little bit more, you can manage that power creep as I referred to earlier. So I don't know if that's I'm not a game designer myself, but that's what this seems to be they're doing to order to manage that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, John or Andy, any thoughts about this card and just how it impacts kind of that like multi-card removal, but there's like synergy, so you have to change how you build your decks. Like, how do you all feel about this card and some of the other similar cards?
I think this card's a good case for the low level of power creep, because it is a power creep on Ice Block, but because of the way the decks are built, that this would just straight replace Ice Block. You're now getting an inkable in what would have been potentially a dead card slot in the past, that you're stuck on a must-play card out of your hand in every scenario. And with the -2, you now have much more of the format in range that you did not have in range before for things like Sisu and Brawl that are already widely played.
Yeah, I think this doubling up was huge. Like the -2. But...
Yeah, no, I think the -2 is insane. I mean, like, I'm a purple player first, and I playing against like red blue. You want to like play around Sisu, Brawl, Ice Block, and you want to make sure you're playing like 4 cost characters on the board at all times so that they can't just brawl those away. Now with this in the picture, it's like none of our characters are going to live. Go is just going to die to a brawl. That's scary. That's going to make it harder. So it's going to make it so that like, yes, it's going to be very difficult for purple players to tackle this one card.
Yeah. I will say though, like it feels similar to how Sail replaced like One Jump, where like they are different and they serve a slightly different. I think this actually is even further than the One Jump Sail kind of comparison, because as a Sapphire player, you don't necessarily always have something you want to ink in the way that you would want to do this to be able to activate it. And what I've found is that this card is actually more valuable later in the game, whereas Ice Block is kind of this like early mid-game stabilizer. But if I can do this multiple times and then drop Sisu, like that's where it's really interesting. Or I can ink and then play how far I go, give -2 to -2 and then play Sisu. It makes like Sisu really, really powerful. I think the big Sisu primarily, more so than fully replacing Ice Block. I actually started building a new deck today, and I actually have both in the deck, which is interesting because, again, I also wanted to increase my item count. And I think there may be a case where you actually need like Ice Block on 1 because you want to like ramp on 2, and then you play something like this later on and then kind of combo with it. I think Brawl gets better. I think Medusa gets better. But I don't think it's the same thing as like it serves just the same purpose as Sisu. As a Sisu player, like I don't fully think this like completely wrecks everything. I think it's an incredibly powerful card, but it's not like a straight replacement for Ice Block in all circumstances.
I wonder
That is fair, but you can also head more down a character-based line with like the new Scrooge or the new Belle, where Sapphire Coil is then allowing you to make the most efficient trades possible, where you're trading into something for 0 after you ink for 1, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, too, like really quickly, John, to that point, like this card doesn't require it to be tapped to do anything, so you can use it for other things, like to play Scrooge or even to it's the Aurora that lets you look at the top card. If you tap an item, you can look at the top card and then either choose to leave it on top or put it on the bottom, I believe, or maybe in the discard. I can't recall. But yeah, there are like interesting tactics for tapping items, which I think is a benefit to this. Justin, did you want to add something here?
Yeah, I was thinking about if you had 2 of these down, right? Because that's probably very likely. Then like the little C-suit, the soup one, whatever, the human C-suit, then you can clear a five strength character. There's not. I was trying to rack my brain over 5 strength characters, but there's lots of 4 strength characters that takes out, right? And then you're clearing up an uninkable spot, so you have a bit more ability to afford the human C-suit in a deck, and so that's interesting as well.
I think that's actually a great point because you really struggle with uninkables in Sapphire Steel, or not Sapphire Steel, but Ruby Sapphire, where you're like, do I want to do this or not? And if you play Little Sisu, you kind of have to play like Ice Block, and it was already this balance. So I think even Sailor and a few others, I know I did this. I just cut Little Sisu and Ice Blocks a little bit because I was like, I'd rather lean more into this like more consistent version. So that's a great point, Justin. Well, let's move on from this card. John, what's another card that you feel like is going to shape the meta that came from Archazia's Island? Still never going to get it right by the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I sent you a list here.
Yeah, you did.
What was the first one that I put on that
you
list?
said Belle. Okay, speaking of more Sapphire cards, The Apprentice, which, by the way, this art is really amazing.
Amazing.
Celebrate the art. Yeah.
Coming out of Magic, I'm just going to refer to it as mana. 0 mana 3/3 is obscene. And they gave it a tool in this set that allows you to play this and then Sapphire Coil or Popsicle on the same turn. On turn 1, you're going to play potentially 6 ink worth of cards in one turn. That's obscene. There's no place where this is not going to be a busted card.
I don't know. I'm
completely
skeptical.
No,
But
I
Andy, go
completely
ahead.
agree. I completely agree. It's gonna be scary. I think it's better for like blue steel. I think they're gonna be able to use it better with all their 8 popsicles that they have. And it's just like people are calling it. They're calling it the blue Cinderella right now. It's on turn 1, you get a blue Cinderella. It's even better statted than the Cinderella that we currently have. Yeah, it takes another combo piece, but you have 8 of those combo pieces in your deck for that one turn.
Themselves when
That
you play
replaces themselves.
the key purpose there. You're not losing card advantage by doing this.
Nope. I feel like your combo kind of loses resources in red blue, like with that red yeah. That's why I like you more for blue steel.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just within this set that they printed something that's aggressive within this set for her, the full package.
Yeah. And then you also have the shift lines into the red-blue Belle. So they were obviously indicating that Belle was like a red-blue type card with how they designed the set. The only reason I'm skeptical, and then Justin, maybe you can break a tie, but again, I think like a lot of these cards now, as we get more, come down to like you have to make all of these decisions in decks. And like it's like, do I go this direction? Do I go that? Like, let's take Sapphire Steel, for example. Like, at the end of set 6, we already had 3 versions, maybe even 4 versions of Sapphire Steel. Some were more of the Kiwi Bird, a version which was much more of like an aggro mid-range deck that I actually think this fits well into, ironically, like the lower to the ground one. And I think Harlan Sweet, who kind of put together that deck with Jack's Shadows, has already put out a version with this in it. And I think that version's like really, really interesting. You then have like Lamb Chops, who's playing this kind of like mid-range wheel kind of deck, like just kind of toolboxy deck. I think this card would be really hard to put in that deck. Like that deck doesn't even play Fortispheres from my understanding already. And like it's a interesting mix of a deck. Then you have more of the traditional Sapphire Steel, which is like a little bit more control, plays a little bit more like the long range red-blue decks. Again, I don't know where she fits into this in those decks. I think that's the thing, you know, John, you and I were talking before the call, like about Tamatoa, the new one. It's like, where does this card fit in? I'm not sure yet. And I think we're going to have to almost build into it. But yeah, am I just naive here? Like, John's looking at me like he wants to jump through the screen and be like, "Are you kidding me?" So Justin, before John hurts me, or hurts my ego at least, yeah, what do you think about this card?
It's more difficult for me to comment because I'm not naturally a blue player, but I think what I would wonder is see a full build with it in there, because I wonder, people are talking about the potential. People talking about this 3-card combo, and if you talk about Ruby Sapphire, you often don't have your turn 2 jump with your Hiram and your Popsicle. Those are your priority 3 things you want in Ruby Sapphire, right? And you also don't have all 3 of those as your perfect like opening hand. You do have them plenty of times, but if you're so when people talk about this through the lens of having those 3 cards, I'm not sure if that's like really where we're getting the value. It's nice when it just absolutely goes off. But back to my original point was, I wonder if you can fit it in, if there is space in blue steel, because blue steel, like with the wheel, it feels like there's not much room. But like I said, I'm not a big blue player, so I'm not a good tiebreaker. I just would say, hey, show me a deck. Show me that it works.
Show me a list.
I think where we're going to see this stand out more than anything are in more controlling based decks. This gives you a body to interact with your opponent's board starting on turn 1, which has always been the biggest drawback of running any controls. You have to sit there and watch them play for the first couple turns and hope that you can turn the tables by the time that you start stabilizing. This allows you to compete with their board from.
Yeah. No, and I think it's fair. And again, I think until we see a deck, it's gonna be interesting. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say I agree with John, but like when we talked to Lamb, he plays us, me, and Argus because he wants that early aggro, to defend against early aggro. Just replace those with her, and she's free. And it's just good. It's just now you have room for other cards. Instead of playing 7 of your 2-drop cards that you normally want to be ramping on. Like, he's like, I have to decide if I want to ramp this turn or if I want to play a Smee or an Argus to like defend against Flynn. Why not just do that? Do turn 2, but turn 1 you just do this. And I think about like the 3-card combo with red blue. I think of Diablo, Cove, and Diablo, and then you need a song to shift it. And Zan always gets those 4 cards, always.
If you are mulligan for it, you can get it quite often.
You can get it.
Fair enough.
So it sounds like a combo that's going to be good when you get it, but I feel like it's just going to be good no matter what.
I completely agree that this is blue steel, though. Yeah, I think if you miss in a non-popsicle 8 popsicle build, I think you run potential to go too low on hand size.
Yeah, I also would argue that the Diablo play line like starts replacing itself almost immediately with refilling your hand, which this doesn't, and you're also getting rid of an item that you could have gotten rid of later to draw 2 cards off Hiram and stuff like that. Again, we're gonna end on this. Right. I do want to move to a new color because I think you're just gonna have to wait and see how the plays. It's easy to talk in theory, but until you start playing the play patterns, I think we'll start seeing. So we'll see who's right. Whether it was me, of course, or maybe John or Andy. We'll have to see. Justin can be the Pete referee in that situation. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep.
Well, let's jump to another card that I think has gotten a lot of hype and also surfaces a color combination that I think is really interesting this set. And I actually saw, speaking of the last card, I saw like a Belle item Geyser deck that I thought was really interesting earlier today. But John, I think this was another card you surfaced. So what's your take on this card? Like initial reactions and maybe your more like sober-minded reaction to this now.
I wish I had a more sober-minded reaction. I've been playtesting against one of my buddies who runs green-blue almost exclusively for the last few sets. For about the last week, we've had proxy decks we've been playing through. And I'll tell you right now, with anything mid-range, anything control, I haven't been able to get a single game. Not a 1 into this Geyser deck. I've been able to get a 50-50 with aggro, but it is a legit 50-50. I am kind of terrified for what this is going to do for the format, and we are all going to end up playing around this card before too long.
Yeah, this card is kind of scary. Like, you read it on first, and there's so many dynamics here. You almost, like, I had to reread it again, and maybe like even a third time just to make sure I understood the dynamic here. But Justin, like, I know you're not a Sapphire player specifically, but like when you read this card, like, how did you think this card was going to impact the meta?
Well, I think what's more comical is that I read it as just the other player puts the parts back there, and I look at broken. How do they design this? But it's both of you. So, and then I just didn't see I haven't. I've seen a build now, and I don't want to share exactly what's in it. It's not my build. But I can see how you might be able to recover quickly. Running this after you destroy someone else's hand that's not prepared to re-ramp again. I do wonder about, I guess, if you're inking, it's going back in your hand, you're going to have extra cards to put back down. So it seems like at least could be fun for the person that's playing blue-green.
Yeah, I will say the blue-green deck that kind of like surfaced towards the end of set 6 that like bend your will, all of that stuff was like a miserable deck to play against. I agree. I don't want to play against this card, but I'm curious to see how it fleshes out. Andy, what do you think about this card?
I probably am the Silver Mind, but maybe because I haven't seen the deck list. I haven't seen the vision for it. I've never played these two color combos together. I played against the deck that ended, what's ending right now, the set 6, quite a bit at the 10K and like at locals, and I feel like it was pretty like straightforward to beat. Like you play four cost characters, you're just drawing, you're removing things. I don't see it as a threat right now, but I can eat my words later.
John, did you have something else you wanted to say about this card? Or even just the color combination, like maybe kind of the thoughts behind here and where that might show up?
Well, I will say what makes this card dangerous more than anything is if you have a Fishbone Quill in play. So say you play Clarabelle, and this deck will get to 10 ink pretty quickly. You play Clarabelle, you play Ink Geyser, pull everything back, go ahead and ink with Fishbone Quill, ink for turn, pass, or play something, doesn't really matter. It comes back to you, ink for turn, Fishbone Quill, bend to my will. Your opponent's now at 4 ink with no hand, and that can happen pretty routinely with this card.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see. I already hated bend to my will, so if I get geysered and bend to my will, like I'm like, it's forcing me into submission. Very frustrating. We'll stick on the Sapphire kind of like train because Ravensburger loves Sapphire cards, it seems like. And the other one that you brought up that I'll let you speak to, John, was Scrooge, the new Scrooge. So this one right here. So thoughts on this? Where does this fit in? What deck's it going to be in? How do you think it's going to impact the meta?
So this actually kind of opens up a deck that's been on the fringe of playable for a while now. So Oswald items have been right on the very fringe of being able to be played for quite some time. Between this and the Belle we talked about earlier, it's enough free bodies on top of all the weird draw mechanics that you have within that deck to maintain board state while doing your draw combo that has been traditionally within that deck. You're either choosing to draw or play removal, and you can't do both, and it gets really clunky. This really flattens out that clunkiness pretty well. This is another deck we've been testing.
Yeah, I can speak to that too, because I've been trying to break Oswald for a while, and I even do like this card, even if you just cast it on turn 3. So if you ramp on 2 and cast it on turn 3, like, it gives you another way to search. It's way better than this, the prior one, which was Scuttle that you played on 2 because you had to decide to ramp or not. I also think, like, I've been seeing, like, you playing Oswald later in the game. Like, it's kind of like Geyser. Like, think about 10 ink Geyser. Like, that's different than, like, doing it early in the game. And I think that's where we need to stretch our play patterns, which is like Oswald late into double Oswald could be really interesting. Coil late, I think, is really interesting. And this card definitely fills a good spot, almost where Tala sits in there, but has a lot more synergy with the item deck. And so I really like this card a lot. I think it might see more play than we might even expect across a multitude of decks. Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Emerald, Ruby Sapphire.
Is this better than Queen? Or is Queen just better than this?
This is definitely better than Queen.
this is so much better than Queen. Just because
Yeah.
on 3, I mean, your ideal play line, you have 8 ramp on 2, right? So you're always ramping on 2, and you're always going to be able to play a 4-cost character on 3, while Queen, you have to wait a turn, correct?
Yeah, you do. I think
And it's
that's
just-
the key, though, is you have to wait a turn. And I think what we've learned in Lorcana is that things you have to wait a turn, like, just aren't actually as good as you think they are. Or things that, like, don't do anything on play, like, are just so much less powerful than other cards. Or at least that's what it seems if previous sets come into play.
And this brings back that same thing we were talking about earlier. This is a card that replaces itself. You're not losing card advantage, and you can potentially do it for 0 if it's later in the game.
And it does my favorite thing. It sings how far I go, which is my favorite thing. Yeah.
I just challenge you because whenever I see you play the Queen decks, right, which just hasn't been in late sets, but they usually are doing it. They're usually tapping it multiple times. So the ability to kind of play it multiple times when you're tapping it seems nice versus you get this one time. That's why the challenge.
No, and I think that's true. And I think especially as we get an increasing amount of cards that ready characters so they can do it again, even on the same turn. You know, we've seen more of those. We even saw recently the Ruby Steel deck that was kind of like the fan the flames.
Fan the flames.
And then there's the 1-drop one, the Ruby one that unreadies it. So Justin, I think you're right. Maybe in like a Ruby Sapphire item build, like Queen's still powerful. I still have my 4 Enchanteds. I'm holding out. I want to play. I love the Enchanted Queen. It looks so good. And yeah, so for my sake, Justin, I hope so.
And you have the Raya too in Ruby that people play with that.
Absolutely. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, being able to Queen and then Raya and then ramp, and then double items, that could be huge. That could be really huge.
I hate items. I hate items so much.
You're going to see so many more.
As a Blurple player, it's really hard to play against.
Hey, someone did say maybe, Belle, you could shift into the other Belle or something like that. So you could maybe play items Blurple, or I don't know, Andy. How do you feel about item Blurple?
I thought about it. I think I played against John once, like a little OT, like a OTK deck with time, and it was pretty fun. It worked, but once you know what's happening, you can play around it. But when I first saw this card, I was like, how do I put items into Blurple? Because I love this card. I even like it just as, I usually look at the art, I look at the cost, if it's uninkable, then I look at the stats, and then I read the effect. So I cover everything and slowly review. I'm like, all right, please have a good effect for Blurple. not in Blurple.
So, it is worth mentioning that in this, there was a tournament over in Europe recently that was a little over 200 people. There was a top 8 list that was intentionally playing Hades, the 3/6 vanilla Hades, because of the stat line. This is just strictly better. You'll take a 4/4 over the 3/6 almost every day.
I mean, it made a couple points there where it's like into the battlefield, right? Effect versus the Queen, and then the body being a 3/3 on the Queen. But I think you guys talked about the Queen coming in play 1 turn later, but maybe we're talking about a different Queen, because the Queen Diviner is a 3-drop, 3 cost. Maybe clarify for me why the Queen would have to come down 1 turn later than Scrooge.
It's not that it's 1 turn later. It's that you can only use its effect. You can't use the effect the second you play it.
Yeah,
I got
you have to wait.
So next turn you're going to top. Okay.
Yeah,
but you have the extra ink though, so maybe I don't know, you play another popsicle or you play whatever.
No, and I think that's true. And 2, we have to remember, Queen puts the item in play if it's under 3 cost. So
under 3,
again, I think there's upsides to both decks. I think it goes back to a lot of these cards outside of the context of the deck they're in, becomes really challenging. And I think we're going to see that with some of the other cards we want to talk about today. But just so we make sure that this podcast isn't a Sapphire celebration, we'll just jump to a completely different card. This is one you put on the list, John, and this was one of the last ones you put on the list was this beast. And again, the art on
Art's
point.
Amazing.
So John, what's your take on this card? It doesn't have Sapphire in it, so I am already against it. But yeah,
I love anything that's overstated for its cost. This is another overstated for its cost card. While Vanish is relevant, it's only off actions. So, I mean, sure, a Heffalumps could kill it, but you're not, generally speaking, if somebody's throwing an action at your character, it's dying anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. I don't see it as a real drawback. What I'm seeing is being 4/4 in a color combination that traditionally can draw a lot of cards that gains 2 lore on entry that you can then bounce and do again if you're to win the game. I've done it a few times. I've seen it done a few times already with this card in testing. It's really nasty. You can in one turn 4 lore out of your hand is just it's hard to compete with.
Andy, you're a fellow Amethyst player, and Amethyst Steel specifically, and Justin, you too. So yeah, what do you guys think about this card? Because I'm just going to keep my mouth shut for this entire segment, because I hate that this card exists. That's my comment.
Go for it, Justin.
Yeah, you get Coil, so I don't want to hear it. No, I mean, I think what I really like about it, and I ran into a lot, is that those just stalemates when you're playing against Amber Steel, like aggro or mines. You've got, Rose was instant ink when I play Purple Steel. And so it was like, well, I'm playing that because I'm never questing with it. Because if I do, you're going to just Rapunzel me for 3. So this just opens me up to just like, okay, I can take out a Lawrence. I can feel free to quest with it if I want to. I can take out a Daisy. And when they just start loading up the board with 4 bodies, it's hard to do anything. And eventually get to the point where they just quest for game. They just sit there readied. And it can be a challenge sometimes. So I like the idea of this. I do worry about whether it's going to be really fragile to just let the Storm Rage on and Strength of a Raging Fire. But if they're using Strength of a Raging Fire, then they're not getting my Genie, and I can quest over them and let them sit with that stalemate there. There's a lot of, I like a lot about this card. I like that it's in the 3 spot. So I think it fits pretty well into the existing Purple Steel builds. I'm excited to play with it and see what kind of difference it makes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Justin. And if I'm not playing Blurple, I'm playing Purple Steel. And I think this card just gets you there gets you the last 2-4 lore that you need to win the game. Usually when you play Purple Steel, you can get quickly into like the 13-14 range and you need like a closer. And this is like a perfect card. Even if it doesn't live, if you can use it as effect once late game. Usually I'm playing this late game. I don't, unless it's my only option, I don't ever see myself playing this on 3. Just because I want to do more stuff. I want to crab a Diablo into something if they expose something, or I want to be even using friends over doing other Foxy and stuff like that. I want their removal to come out when I play this card, because I want a body and I want it to at least quest for 1, and if it doesn't, then I still get my Tuller. So I think it's just like a game closer.
Yeah, and I think I said I wasn't going to comment, but I do think, Andy, you brought up a good point, is that there can be places where you play White Rose, or you need like a 5th, 6th goat, or you just need like the additional lore gain where I can get over the fence by drawing this and playing it, or having it on board and being able to rebounce it and get those extra 2 lore, I think is going to be critical. I also haven't seen, Justin, to your point about actions and stuff, it's like the actions that people are playing are ones that would probably banish this anyways, or they should be using it to banish Calhoun or Genie or some other things. And so they may just leave this on the board. And the fact that it's 4 to take out Daisy, Lawrence, etc. is huge. I think this is going to get a lot of miles.
It fits a gap really well that deck had.
Yeah.
It really closes that gap.
I love it. I'm probably a Purple Steel player next.
Well, let's get into another card that's exciting that isn't a Sapphire card, which is Mushu. I've never played the Ruby Steel decks. I tried the Fan the Flames deck recently. I've heard a lot of people that get excited, and this card is seems pretty insane when you read the card. But yeah, what's our take? Who wants to tackle this one?
I actually saw a game being played today between a couple of our local players, and Stephanie, actually. She was running Mushu and the new Mulan. Obviously, she was testing it out. But there ended up being a spot where she gained 4 lore from one swing. And it was kind of nasty. She's already at I think she's already at 14 and swung with one character for 4. Gained 4 lore off that one swing and then turned sideways for game. It was real nasty to see. I think that's the exception, not the rule. I don't think you're going to see that often. It is a good card, but I don't think it's going to break the game.
Does it make Ruby Steel viable, though? Or does this set, maybe there's other cards that have kind of enabled Ruby Steel this set, but will we see this at, tier 1 or even S tier at some level? Can it compete with the other aggro decks?
I think you still need card draw, which is a challenge in this. And so, you got Wheel and Dock, which I think are somewhat reasonable. So then you got decent shift lines, and Robin goes well with this, right? So you're gaining 4 off of Robin and Mushu. Obviously, you got Calhoun. So, maybe there's enough card draw there. This character looks like fun, and I hope they come up with an enchanted version, because everything about it's pretty cool.
So cool.
Yeah. The artwork is just, again, incredible this set. It's really, really cool. I do like how you were like, there's no card draw, and then you name 2 cards that are insane. That draw cards, you're like, Dock and Wheel. Okay. I was like, this card sings that card. There we go.
Yeah, and
Although,
go ahead.
If you're playing Ruby Steel, do you really want to wheel your opponent, though? I don't feel like that's ever the right answer when you're in Ruby Steel.
No, but I think Dock, we've seen these strategies, empty your hand and then Dock to refill. Again, it costs 5, which is tough. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But it does work as soon as you play it. I think that's another reason I like this card is I play it and I get to challenge with my other characters and they immediately get the effects. It reminds me a little bit of another card I'll pull up here. And this one does have Sapphire in it. I apologize to our audience. But this is another card I think is actually really interesting on the play. Because again, when you play this down, it immediately has a potential effect that is pretty powerful, in being able to kind of push across the line. But what's our take on this card? Even just by itself, I think this card is good. Oh my gosh. I think they're like, it's cute. It's the set champs card, so it can't be good. So that's actually the rule at Ravensburger.
That's the rule. Yeah, that's the rule.
Yeah, so just think about game states and how often you end up in a situation where you have 2 Floodborns in play at the same time. Realistically, you're only giving one other character at max this evasive and ward ability, and the stats are low for 7 inkable. I feel like this is going to be a liability more often than something that you're going to turn around and win the game with.
Is there any good songs that are 7 cost?
No, I think Under the Sea is at 8, and then I don't think in those colors there's any songs that are at 7 that you really want to hit.
I just think anything with ward, I'm always attracted to. I'm like, I at least want to give this a second look, right? And I think on surface, you don't realize that this card itself has ward as long as you shift it, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can move on. I'll take the Sapphire cards off the board and we can jump to something less exciting, even though I feel like there's 4 or 5 other cards on here that are all Sapphire cards. But let's jump to something that maybe, and Justin, you surfaced this as maybe not game changer, but it was at least interesting, which is the new Queen card. Which
I don't think you can find it on Dreamborn right now. I think you're going to have to pull it off of our thread. It's
okay.
What was it? The Queen Jealous Beauty or something like that. It's what it interprets to.
Yeah, we don't have the English version yet.
Yeah. So it's a 4-cost purple card. It's a 4/3, a quest for 1, and then there you go. When you tap it, you can put 3 cards from the opponent's library or discard in their deck to gain 3 lore. I won't even read the rest of it. It's just it might pull it off sometimes, but 4/3 I think should live for a turn. I would guess. At least the decks you're really trying to punish with it. And with that new Tamatoa that's pulling 2 items back, you can put them take them out in the discard. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as we were talking earlier about the other queen, if I could potentially trigger this multiple times in one turn or do something like trippy, or if maybe there's a lot of princesses in the grave or in the discard, I gain 4 lore, which is pretty interesting. But yeah.
I think this card is set up for a future set. So they've slowly but surely been releasing a mill deck. Just one piece here, one piece there in the last few sets. I think probably 5 or 6 sets from now, we're going to have a legitimate mill deck in this game. And this card will be a centerpiece of that deck. I don't think this sees any heavy play until then.
What?
Until, yeah.
Why is this? I'm missing why this fits into a mill deck.
Because what we were talking about earlier, where you're interacting with it and making it happen multiple times a turn. Quite often in these games, there's quite a few decks that will only end up with 2 or 3 cards in their discard unless you do something very specific. So in those scenarios, this card becomes really dead. You have to force the cards into their discard quite often.
I gotcha. No, I'm following. I was thinking, like, how am I going to make it so that it can't draw anything if I'm putting stuff, like, back in there? But you're talking about the effects that you use the discard vial. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could go both ways. I also, John, think overall there's probably a mill deck in the future. Maybe also we need more discard disruption where, like, yes, this is a benefit right now, but in the future, Justin, to your point, you were talking about items with Tamatoa, but, like, maybe, again, if we ever get recursion, like, almost, you know, kind of like a Perdita, but, like, some other thing, or, like, more Lilo effects, where there's actually a bunch of things that we actually want to put under, this could be interesting. I also think, again, like, where my head goes is, like, a late game effect, where it's like, okay, like, I beat prep and then cast 2 of these, like, almost like locations, and then, like, try to gain lore or something like that. Like, again, not on 4, but, like, as another win condition later, it's probably not better than locations, but, like, maybe there's something there.
But I think that's
I do like that thought process.
I think that's the key to it, though, is that it's not on 4, right? That's why it's not necessarily game changing, because you play it later and then now the chance that it lives, that you can tap it, is not as great.
Yeah. Right now, I think if you're looking for an effect in purple to shuffle cards back into somebody's discard, you're just going to take the It Calls to Me. It's a cantrip. It shuffles 3 back in. If you're really worried about interacting with your opponent's discards, I think that's where you're at right now.
So
I think this is, yep, 1 cost song.
1 cost song.
I think that's right. Well, I know there was another card we just wanted to talk about because we were just like, is this interesting? Which I think is, I don't know what the actual name, it's the Panther Cat Guardian. Let me see if I can find that too.
It's
I
also
think that's an amazing card.
I like it a lot.
Let me see if I can find at least, like, yeah, here we go. We can
There
at
you
least take a look at it.
That's perfect.
Let me share this tab instead. There we go.
So it has bodyguard, and when it dies on your opponent's turn. Okay, we have the translation. Never mind.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's a little tough, but yeah, it's right here. Yeah, bodyguard,
like
you must be brave. Yeah.
It's another swords effect, right?
Yep, it's a swords effect on your opponent's turn, and it has bodyguard. It is an amazing top piece to a Steel Song deck. It's an amazing top piece to an aggro deck. It does a lot in blue steel midrange as well. This card fits into a lot of decks, and it fits in very naturally.
Maybe it is game changing. I was thinking, I wasn't sure that this was really going to be groundbreaking, but I didn't see really much downside on it, and it felt like it was doing everything he wanted it to do.
Yeah.
Like, it had the right cost, it has the right body, it quests for 2, like, and then it also can, like, if you toss a Chenpo in front of it, or whatever, and then you can sing with this, like, Whole New World. Now, like, your whole board's protected, and if they happen to take something out, then their board puts you in a state where you can Tinkerbell or another Grab Your Swords, actual Grab Your Swords.
I'd definitely play this over Chenpo for sure.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting too, because a lot of times in the Sapphire decks, because you have other effects that deal damage or like puts damage on board, whether it's Tinkerbell or other things, like, and they have to take out this first. And it doesn't say it's banished in a challenge. So if they storm it or like whatever to get rid of it, like all of their characters immediately take 2. And that might even just make all of your trades better. Like even if they can now trade into your characters, like they can't just take out your, your 2/2 with a 4/4 or something like that, because that 4/4 now has 2 damage. So it makes decisions like probably more complicated. So I think, John, you were on to something, and Justin too, like playing this down like really puts your opponent in like a weird situation, especially in those like stalemates, that we were talking about earlier, Justin, where like you guys were just playing like, hey, we're building up our boards and I pop this and then quest, and you're like, what do I do now? Like
I just quest and don't pop it.
Yeah.
Hope for
That's
the
like
best, but then I can come
Don't
back
pop
at
it.
you. Yeah.
No,
And then
yeah.
can come back to you
I
and
know.
challenge
I
you.
think the biggest thing about this card is going to be sequencing. A lot of people are going to mess up. A lot of people are going to mess up sequencing. They're going to be like, wait, my guys died? I forgot that it kills everything, and it's going to be like those, you're going to have to really check your board state and actually like think about your decision, your attacks, because you might think, oh yeah, I'm going to put crab in here, put crab onto this. Oh wait, it's dead.
And we were talking about power creep early. This is one of the prime examples of power creep in the game. I've been trying to fit Grab Your Swords into Steel Song for a while. It's been rough because it's uninkable at 5 with uninkable count right now. And now getting Grab Your Swords on a body that's inkable, I mean, the power creep is remarkable on that.
Yeah.
I like
Well,
yeah.
Well, let's move on to another steel card, but this card is again, it's not power creep, but that we have one of these already, and it's the Troubadour. It's basically
It's a 1/3. It's
Ursula
Ursula.
Vanessa. And I'm just curious, like, what you all think about that. You guys are shaking your heads. So, again, I'm not an Amber Steel player.
Ursula's
okay,
still
can
better.
you explain, though, why
it.
this is not better, or at least an option instead of Ursula? Like, anyone want to tackle that? Just for the audience, like, why do we think that? Because this card looks way better than Vanessa Ursula. So, like, if I was just choosing off art, I would choose this card all day.
Based off art only?
Yeah, this card's insane. Look at this card. Yeah,
no, if it's an artwork. So the thing is, it is a toss-up between the two. But right now, Ursula Vanessa, when she dies in one shot. And the things that are killing her aren't really going to care that you have a 1/3 body that has resist versus having the 1/4 body. And the 1/4 body is going to survive more interactions than what the Troubadour will survive in the current game state. So it in the long run, Ursula's already on the downswing in Steel Song. Most decks are only on a 3 of or a 2 of at this point. I don't think you're forcing in a Troubadour over her on those lists. Now you can, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but I still think Ursula is probably just slightly better it's only in just a few niche interactions. Outside of that, the other interactions are still going to be effectively the same.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, and I think it's the body. It's just that 1 health. It's better. Like we discussed earlier, like you play around Rapunzel's a lot. So like if it's a 1/4 and you can hit a 3/3, you draw 3 cards right there. And getting 3 cards off Rapunzel, it feels like you just won the game.
Yeah. So I hadn't heard someone say it that succinctly, Andy. Not that, John, you aren't a poet or anything with your words. But I had totally forgot. I'm like, but I still don't understand. Like, it feels the same thing, but having 3 damage on the character to do the Rapunzel, like, I'll bow to that. We'll play bad art for Rapunzel draws.
I'll play devil's advocate on this, even though I agree with you. What seems awkward though here is like challenging into this with when you have 3 3s on the board, and you got to do 2 of them to kill it. But I guess that's the same with a 1/4. But I guess your argument comes down to really 2 2s, right? If you have 2 2s on the board, but you don't really play with 2 strength characters. There's not a lot of them out there, so that's where I think it becomes more niche. And like you already said, the rest of it, right? You can draw 3 cards versus 2. on this with Rapunzel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If this card was in purple steel, I'd play it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be perfect. It'd be perfect.
Okay,
let's-
so
This card should have been in purple steel.
If we could not give Purple Steel something that says Singer, that'd be great. If we just keep away from that.
yeah, no thanks. I think the closest is the new Amber Amethyst cards that like have Singer or whatever, but that still requires you to play Amber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump away from some characters and kind of do a rapid fire round on some actions that are in this set. So the first one I wanted to talk about was Restoring Atlantis. What is
Beautiful
our...
card.
Let's look at the enchanted one. Look at this. This is spicy. That looks amazing. Like Kita all up in there.
What color is it though?
It
Steel.
is steel. So yeah,
Okay.
we'll go back to this one so it's easier to see. Because the enchanted, you're like, I don't know. But
Just
yeah, so it
happens.
says your characters can't... It's not a song. I think if this card was a song, it'd be better. But your characters can't be challenged until the start of your next turn.
So I think that we're going to see this card played. Not a lot. It's not going to be in the tier 1 list. But one thing that made Diggy Hole so good with the original version was you're effectively playing this effect right here with the Kita on 5. You're saying, hey, you're not going to challenge my board for one turn. I get to quest this turn, and then I get to quest next turn for game. This is going to allow that same interaction.
No, I agree. It's a uninkable Kita. It's a Swords of Revealing Light, as the Yu-Gi-Oh players are saying. I don't know. I don't see it being played. It's uninkable. I don't want to have this in my hand. I'd rather just play a genie. Just add more genies. Add more, threats that are gonna win me the game. Get me cards. But yeah, I can see maybe a 1-of, a 2-of to just like blindside people. But like I feel like in an open deck list format, I think you can easily play around this card, in my opinion.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Justin, this was one that you sent over. Restoring the Crown. I guess it's not on here yet. Let me pull it up
It is.
over.
Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah.
Restoring.
They just don't want me to put any cards that I think are interesting on here.
Yeah, they really haven't. I don't know why. They were just like, nope, not today.
All of them.
They even have the enchanted.
Here we go. So exert all opposing characters. Whenever one of your characters banish another character in a challenge this turn, gain 2 lore.
Yeah, I just go back to that stalemates of Amber Steel. I've run into there's a huge Amber Steel in my local meta, and I play Purple Steel, right? And we sit there and just the board just keeps building up, and it just seems so juicy to like, okay, you got 10 characters now, insta game win right there if you just play this, but I think it's gonna sit in your hand against a lot of other decks and just clog it up, and then if you run a dock, which I do, you gotta just throw it away. So it's just a wasted card. So I don't see it actually ultimately getting played. I just would love to pull it off and be like,
I wish. I think it was an inkable. It might be inkable and maybe 7 cost, but even then, I don't know.
What I put in our chat earlier was basically the card is uninkable. Right? I don't know, and I think people have kind of hit on this before, but it basically reads, you can't put this card in your sideboard. And that's kind of what we have is, right, the ability to ink stuff is effectively our sideboard in Lorcana, so that's basically what this says.
Yeah. Inkable is our attack cards. Uninkable is we're going to play this card no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a tough card, I think.
I love the idea of the card, but at the end of the day, there's too many decks it's going to be dead into. And you can't have a dead 6 drop in your hand.
Okay, well, let's switch over to an inkable song, and I'll share this one instead.
Nice.
We have The Return of Hercules.
I love this card.
Each player may reveal a character card from their hand and play it for free.
This little Timmy is so happy. So, I don't know if you guys played Magic or not, but there's a card called Show and Tell that absolutely broke the game. It continues to break the game 20 years after its printing. It is a remarkably powerful effect to be able to play anything from your hand for free, no matter what, even if your opponent gets to play a card as well. That being said, there's nothing in the game right now that I really want to play this card for. I fully expect that they're going to print something big and nasty in the future that you absolutely want to be able to play this card, drop it for free, and it'll just completely swing the game in your favor. But right now, this card's not there. It is set up to absolutely break the game of whenever they do print something big that will absolutely terrorize your opponent.
What stands out to me is you got to have the bigger character in hand. So I want to look at your hand first before I play this. Is my character bigger than yours?
I mean, it's in the Diablo Ursula color.
Yeah. You can set it up. But even if you do play something big, like say my board's empty and you play a dragon, I play a 1-drop and your value is just gone. Like usually when you play Maleficent Dragon, you want to kill something like a Tamatoa, a 8-drop, a big sea suit. Like you want value from it. So I do like that the first player, the player casting it has to reveal first, because you can play around it in a sense.
Yeah, you can also opt not to reveal a card. So like in that case, Andy, like you don't even have to play the 1-drop at that point. You can just not play anything, and then Dragon like didn't do anything if you wanted to. So there are a lot of interesting things with this card. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, you could throw together a green steel deck with Chief Bogo and Prince Philip and get really cute with it right now. And wipe your opponent's board on turn 5. But
That's true.
I don't think that's realistically something that's worth counting on at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say the art. I'm a big Hercules fan. I want this card. It's beautiful. And I love Megara. I love Herc. It's just amazing. Love the gates to Olympus. It's awesome.
Well, we definitely have a few more cards that we want to get to. I want to flash one more action that I'm kind of bullish on, and it's this one. Show me more. I actually think this card, like, not many people are talking about it. I think it's a little bit of a sleeper. I think it's just really interesting, especially in, like, if we go back to the Ruby Amethyst burn decks, where, like, you were playing Amethyst Chromicon to be able to draw a bunch of cards, and you're just like, I'm going to draw cards and gain lore and, like, do different things. The advantage of drawing 3 to you might be more than your opponent. So I think this card's really interesting. We'll have to see. You gain 1 off Shark when you play it. You can get it back with Shark. There might be some compounding stuff there, especially if you need to be able to put together a string of actions, almost like a storm deck for those Magic players out there, where you're just trying to go off in one turn, where you're just playing a serialized or set of things. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a Finders Keepers for both players. I look at it like that, because Blurple plays Finders Keepers, some lists do. And I was like, can I play this card? My top deck's going to be better than the opponent's. Like, and I can still play it like on 6. I can play this and play a 4-drop. I'm still developing board. I'm still doing stuff. It could be it's just uninkable, and you do fill your like opponent's cards up. It's just, I think Blurple just. I mean, for my deck, for like Blurple, needed something else to like combat the board or a bigger body, because I feel like giving them bigger cards is just gonna give them the new Tamatoa, the new, like, all these new things that everyone else got, but Blurple.
I love the art on this. Like, I actually really like the art on this a lot. But I have an interesting question now, actually a little bit different here. What would this have to cost to be a song?
That's a good question. Probably 5 or 4.
Finders Keepers. Dang.
Probably 5 or 4, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
I will say,
if this would cost 4 as a song, I would play this card immediately.
I think it has to be like 5 or 6, but just because you sing it, you would get immediate value. So like it's kind of
use the cards first is what I'm thinking, right? So that's what's nice. But like you can't hear, you got to pay 2. So like you talked about Shark using it, right? I feel like in Shark, if we're gonna do that, you need to be at a higher ink count, and this is a 4 plane doesn't put you in the right ink colors to do that. So Blurple stands out as potentially being able to leverage the cards for someone else.
Definitely could. Yeah.
It might be good against like aggro and like mid range decks, but I think against blue, they just do everything better than us. They have dragons, they got big Sisu, they got Coil, they have a Shark to play. Like it's hard. It's a rough life over here.
I will say, my go-to pet deck is a purple steel aggro list that runs Amethyst Chromicon. That's been my pet deck now for a while. The benefit to that build with a Chromicon over this is the idea that you can control when that draw happens. With this, when you play it, your opponent is going to get those 3 cards. You can't piece part it in. You can't try to find just the piece that you need. to push yourself over the top while holding your opponent back from cards they might have been expecting you to give them. This is a more ultimate or more defined thing, and I think you're going to find yourself on the losing end more often than the winning end with it, versus something like Chromicon where it's already a bit of a iffy card in lists, but you have to use it in a timing fashion to make sure that your cards are outperforming what your opponents can get at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll have to just wait and see. There's one more card we want to reveal, and then we're going to talk about what we actually think is going to happen with the meta as we kind of wrap up. But we can't not talk about this card because this card is insane. Yeah, and it looks insane. And Andy and I were talking before John and Justin joined us earlier because they were in a lost Google Meet somewhere. My mistake. Sorry, y'all. But it's not a Sapphire Steel card, but in the artwork, it's like it's holding Popsicle and Fortisphere like in its hands already in the artwork. So maybe that was intentional. But even this artwork is pretty sick as well.
It is.
So I'm excited for both these cards. But Justin, what do you think about this card? I know you're not a Sapphire player, but when you first saw it or look at it today, like, what do you actually think?
No, I think it's a great card. I wonder. I think maybe you play both Tamatoas still. The fact that you don't keep recurring items out of your discard, I wonder, and like Tamatoa being an 8 body and just like really difficult to kill. I'm assuming you're still playing this. If you have the card, you have to compare it to the other Tamatoa, right? So that's where my mind goes, and I don't know that it matters if one is better than the other because you might just be playing both anyways.
Yeah.
So I've been testing 2 different item builds, the red blue and the red steel recently. Both started with 4 of this crab in them, this Tamatoa. At this point, the Tamatoa is out of both lists completely. At 6, his effect is actually rather underwhelming. It looks really good. It looks like it should be amazing. But what ends up happening is, yes, you're pulling back those 2 items. You get the Popsicle and the Fortisphere back in your hand, or you get a couple Popsicles back. And then you're passing turn, and all you did was play a 5/5 or a 4/5 on turn 6. And in a lot of matchups, that's enough tempo loss to kind of put you behind enough that you're not going to recover.
Yeah. It also dies to Zeus as a 4/5. Like there's a few things, again, it goes back to like you get the 2 items, but let's say this said pay 6, get 2 items back, and your opponent discards a card. Like, take that trade. I agree with you, John. I'm actually on the fence about this card. Andy?
I like it for blue steel. You're getting ink. You're getting ink back, or you're getting draw back. You're also blue steel. You're playing cogs. This thing doesn't die to Zeus. If you're like you're going cogs into a wheel into this, you probably have a quill already in place because you're playing items with the wheel deck. So you might have that ink to play that card, or maybe just ink it just to continue accelerating and pushing forward. I think it's a blue steel specific card. I think red just has so many like threats already that I kind of compare this to Shark because it's a 6 cost. And like Shark, yeah, you can get immediate value, but for the most part, you're usually just playing it on 6 and not doing anything if like your board's empty. So you still have to wait a turn. So I feel like it's the same thing, similar health, and like, but you have the advantage of getting a dime next turn or just a free item. You might have wheeled the dime, and next turn you just or you wheel the dime, you play this, you get the dime back. There's a lot of recursion that you can do with this card. I like it for blue steel specifically.
Yeah. I think the thing I would say about this as my final thought would be is I think you have to build more into this than just adding it to a current deck. And again, I feel that way. Like maybe this isn't the Oswald deck, or maybe they'd be like a more item heavy deck. Like, getting back items and having Workshop in play and like playing Popsicle and drawing 2 cards with Workshop like becomes way more interesting. You could maybe even play this instead of playing Wheel. I know we want to play Wheel, but in non-Wheel versions, I think this is actually really interesting as an alternative. But again, I think you still have to build into this. Well, let's do a quick wrap up where we just give final takes. Like, are there any other sleeper cards we didn't cover that you think will actually impact the meta, or things that we might be surprised about as far as decks that impact the meta? We'll kind of just do a wrap up here as we close. How is set 7 meta going to shape up? Andy?
It's going to be very blue heavy, that's for sure. A lot of blue decks.
We are on an island. We are currently on an island in Lorcana, so we are surrounded by water.
By the sea, yeah, by the sea. The blue sea, the red sea.
The Azurite Sea, right? Are we still
Azurite
around?
Sea.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be blue decks versus a lot of burn decks. I think it's just going to be burn decks versus these blue decks. I think one card we didn't cover, but I think might potentially, if someone can build the right color combo with it, is Lady. I really think Lady can maybe help shape up that color combo just because it gives you draw. I don't even think you play the shifts. I think it's just that good just to play all 5.
Interesting.
Green.
Yeah, the green yellow Lady. A Bloodborne hero, 4/4, quest for 2. When you play this, you may return 2 character cards with 2 or less from your discard. That can be a green Ursula to get rid of another beat prep, or it could be another go-go to finish off some lore. I think there's something there. I don't know what the build is yet, but I think it might shape depending on what the meta is. If it's just items and you can just like kind of go wide and maybe race them, I can see it being one of the decks to beat.
Lemon Lime aggro has been making a small splash here in this last set, so there is potential there. That does make sense.
Yeah. So lots of Sapphire, burn. Maybe there's like an aggro tempo-y discard deck of some sort from Andy. Justin, what do you think?
What about the Shift Pete, the 5-drop Shift Pete? In like you already haven't arguably like the best shift target in the game. Like it's like the card that you really don't, in this color at least, right? I don't want to shift it in purple because I want to bounce my Pete, but like once your Pete's down, it's doing like really not doing much. So like this is perfect to just go ahead and get another Pete. Perfect timing too. Like it just turn 3, turn 4, right? It's 5/5 quest for 2, and your SME now doesn't take damage when it quests. Like it's all lines up perfectly with everything they're already doing. So
yeah. So the deck I submitted to actually talk about on this, I think we're going to run out of time and not talk about decks. It was actually green steel discard with this Pete being the only card from the new set in it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. And I'm
prepared.
I see that. No, I think
go off.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to see a lot of burn versus control decks, and I think because of that, there's a really sweet spot for discard to come in because it's good into both. It's really good into both. There's going to be a really strong slot for this in the metagame, and what we might see is another like set 4 metagame where this is absolutely dominated.
I can see that. I think it's going to be a little different without Pucky, but it's definitely, it's such a hard deck to pilot. I like, kudos to the people who do pilot it. It's such a technical deck. Some people like just, Diablo shifts, you draw, then you do the cove. Like people think it's just that, but no, there's so many different like layers to it, and you can easily outplay yourself.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's like you're playing against yourself most of the time.
Yeah.
Justin, any other things you have predictions about? Like, are we just going to see Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel, Amber Steel, Amethyst Steel? Like, is it just a Steel and Sapphire meta, and you just get to pick what splash you want to have?
I'm not sure about Amber Steel, but I'm excited for Amethyst Steel to be. Seems like it's going to be strong, and so it's nice that I'm already in those colors, and that it seems like we can stay in those colors. I was like, not having seen any of the cards, I was just like, oh man, I gotta say bye to my Doc build. It was just so much fun bouncing Doc and just a drug. And so now I get to keep doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Steel Song's
John.
always, I was gonna say, Steel Song's always been my like comfort deck, like my tier 1 comfort deck. I don't think it's playable this set. I don't think we got the tools we needed to stay relevant.
Yeah. Well, I think my take is I think Ruby Sapphire will still be very, very dominant because I just think it's a great deck. Like we just spent an hour with Sailor, and I'm like, man, I'm more convinced than ever that this deck is insane. I think we should see some new decks, but I do think that they're going to have to be truly new decks that build into themselves like through some other side doors, or like think about different combinations, whether it's the Tamatoa and like an Oswald build. Maybe there's a real item deck there. Maybe there is like a pirate deck that's interesting. Like maybe there's a new aggro build. Like maybe there's something that's interesting. Like even Ruby Steel for like maybe that's something there, and we can crack that code. Again, they do have draw. Justin told us Doc and Whole New World, so like I think we're set there. But yeah, I think it's going to be some of the core decks, and so I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, like I have to change everything. Like I don't know, as a competitive player, I don't think you have to change everything. I think you should experiment. But I think there are some core decks that are still going to be great. And I don't think, as we've learned from previous sets with like Jafar and other things, like don't be fully distracted by these like legendaries that come out like Tamatoa and other things. Like they may not actually impact the meta fully. Or they might be like Shark, where Shark's like a 4 of in a deck that, wins, the last DLC of the season. Like I'm not sure, but that's definitely my take. I think we're very excited to see wherever Archazia's island goes and changes the meta.
Almost ended it
Almost.
perfectly.
So close.
So close.
Okay.
So
Don't judge me. We're here to play competitive cards,
that's true. We don't have to read them. We don't have to read them out loud.
You do have to read them in some ways, okay, Andy? And remember, like, we have to love the game too and love the art. I do think the art is incredible. I'm excited to play with it and see where we go. So Justin, John, Andy, thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me on a night where we got all the new cards and be able to chat through it. We'll have to see in a couple months how we actually end up faring. So be back soon. And if you're interested in learning more about how we talk about competitive card games or playing competitively with Lorcana, definitely check out purpleshadowgaming.com, and we'll continue to update you on all things competitive. So we'll see you again soon. Thanks. See you guys.